I want to ask you about the budget bill, because the Senate parliamentarian, by taking some of these measures out from a reconciliation process, has in effect taken away some of the Republicans' pay-fors, right, for not just extending the 2017 tax cuts, but adding other ones like no taxes on tips, et cetera. Right. As you know, the CBO already estimated that the bill in its previous form, the House passed form, would add $2.8 trillion to the deficit over the course of 10 years. Are you comfortable voting for a bill that would add more, given some of these pay-fors are taken away?
Well, let me just say that this is actually one of the biggest tax cuts for the working class Americans and for our middle class. We know that TCJA, the Tax Cut Jobs Act, if that sunsets, is going to take our corporations and small businesses from a 21% to a 43.4% tax hike. That is a massive, massive break. That would actually hurt and cripple many of these businesses. We know that there are things that we could actually sharpen a little bit more. Could we make more cuts? Sure, I'm all for making more cuts. But we can't cut our way to prosperity in this, Jim. We have to grow our way out of it. That's why we have to give enough liquidity, market capabilities, and we have to go ahead and invest in American innovation, American industry, and the American workers, so that we can actually go ahead and grow our GDP at a ratio of 3.5% that allows our GDP to national debt ratio to invert. That's the key here. We can't cut our way to prosperity. We have to grow as a country. We have to stop being less reliant on adversarial nations, and we have to start building America and serving America.
I get that argument, but to repeat the question, as you know, the debt is already at about 130%, I think I have that right, of U.S.
Correct.
GDP. Are you comfortable with that number rising?
Of course I'm not
to, as you
comfortable
say,
with that
invest
rising.
in America?
But we have to go ahead and try and understand. Look, I'm the one that's been arguing and flying the red flag for a while, which is that there's only 28 empires and nations in the world's history who's exceeded a 130% GDP. One of those was the Roman Empire, who was also a republic, who couldn't serve its debts any longer, not because of its failure of military expansionism. I understand the threat of a growing deficit. I would say that our national debt is one of our greatest existential threats in America. But you cannot cut your way to prosperity at this current rate. Any business owner will tell you, I have to have more revenue, I have to have more business in the door. This allows us to be able to go ahead and protect businesses, get less in the federal government's hands, and start handing things back to the states and individuals as our 10th Amendment was intended. So if you really want to go back to the actual problem of this, I would go to 1913, the ratification of the 16th, 17th Amendment of Woodrow Wilson. But what I can tell you is that this president is a negotiator and a businessman. We're going to grow our way out of this with American businesses, American industry, and American oil and gas.
Listen, well, you and I are both fellow fans of history, and I've made the comparison to the Roman Empire myself, so I appreciate the comparison. But before we go, I do want to ask about the cuts to Medicaid, because as you know, many of your Republican colleagues, including in the Senate, Susan Collins, Josh Hawley, are saying this is going to hurt people. It's going to close rural hospitals. Are you comfortable with those significant cuts to Medicaid?
Look, I came from a family where it was a broken home that I was adopted by my grandparents. My grandparents were extremely dependent upon Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and when my grandfather had quadruple bypass, we were dependent upon disability to try and get by. We were that lower to middle class family. My grandfather was a welder. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom and cosmetologist. I know the importance of Medicare and Medicaid. No, I do not want to see any impacts to that. That's why I actually, in the 118th Congress, signed on to Beth Van Dyne's bill, which actually protect and save Medicare and Medicaid. So, no, I'm not happy about the cuts. I want to see what the final product is after the debates, but it's one of those things where we want to continue to serve and protect the American people.
President Trump's domestic policy agenda hitting a major setback. The Senate parliamentarian, essentially the chamber's rules referee, struck down key provisions of his so-called big, beautiful bill, saying they don't meet the strict standards to pass by a simple majority of 51 votes. That includes major changes to Medicaid. And it puts the president's deadline to sign the bill by July 4th, just a week from now, of course, in jeopardy. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is at the White House this morning for us, I hope. Jeff, there you are. President Trump held an event to make his case, to try to push this bill through. But what are you learning? Because there is a lot of jostling going on and a lot of concern, particularly among Republicans.
Hey, good morning, sir. We are here at the White House. President Trump is as well, and we are learning he is planning to spend the weekend here in Washington, a rare weekend in Washington, because he wants to stay close to the Senate as he is urging and pushing Senate Republicans to pass his sweeping tax and spending bill. It's really the signature piece of legislation that really touches every corner of American lives. There's no question, though, there are some hurdles. You mentioned the referee in the Senate. That's the Senate parliamentarian. They are ruling that many of the key provisions are out of order. So it's back to the drawing board for some of these key provisions on Medicaid spending that really have a deep impact on rural hospitals and many other programs. But the president had an event here at the White House late yesterday. He had this to say about any Republican holdouts.
I shouldn't say this, but we don't want to have grandstanders where one or two people raise their vote. We vote no, and they do it to grandstand. That's all. Not good people. They know who I am, who I'm talking about. I call them out, but we don't need grandstanders.
What may be grandstanding to the president are actually deep policy differences to many of the Republicans in his own party. The bottom line is right now Senate Republicans do not have the 50 votes they need because of some of those key provisions on Medicaid cuts. You can see right there. Several other things are also in this, but the debt ceiling increase, that is one huge part of all of this that is needed. But the reason for all of these cuts to many safety net programs is to find enough revenue to extend the Trump tax cuts. So that is what is at issue here, Sarah. There's no question this will pass at some point. Obviously, Republicans control the Senate as well as the House. But once the Senate does pass it, it has to go back to the House to approve all these changes. So there are many tough days ahead, and it's unclear if they will meet the president's July 4th deadline.
You've been doing some great reporting on just how these Medicaid cuts could directly affect families. What did you learn?
Sir, we often talk about Medicaid cuts here in the aggregate, but we spent some time in Missouri, obviously a red state, but where these Medicaid cuts are having deep effects on people's lives. There is real concern. We met a mother named Courtney Leader, whose 9-year-old daughter Serena depends on Medicaid funding, and she explained why.
It's not a luxury. This is not a luxury thing. Like I do not have my daughter enrolled on Medicaid so that we can have fancy things. I have my daughter enrolled in Medicaid so that we can keep her alive.
So this is just one of the many stories we heard, and we'll bring more of that to you in the next hour. But it's one of the reasons Republican Senator from Missouri, Josh Hawley, is one of the Republican senators who are raising objections to this. So what the president calls grandstanding actually has real-world effects on people's lives. But rural hospitals across the South, across the country, really are at risk because of the potential cuts in some Medicaid. That is why many Republican senators, from Tom Tillis in North Carolina to Susan Collins in Maine, are raising deep questions about this. So that's why it's back to the drawing board, trying to make some fixes on this legislation.
That piece out of Missouri, out of the state, of the Republican who's kind of raising the loudest ruckus about this, and can you mark the moment where you have this many Republicans basically defending a safety net program?
Sure, and I think those are the key words, a safety net program, Audie, and I think that we need to get to a point where hopefully those individuals are prospering and successful and have the economic means not to necessarily rely on Medicaid as their means of getting health care. There is concern among Republicans, as you've said, because they recognize that those are our voters. Increasingly, those are individuals who've left the Democrat Party and gone to the Republican Party. And so there is a reason why you see this debate playing out the way it is. And the frustration is now with the Senate parliamentarian, an unelected bureaucrat in Washington, D.C., and there's a move afoot by people like Senators Roger Marshall, Tommy Tuberville, and Marsha Blackburn to impose a term limit or fire that person because they've made other changes to Medicaid, specifically as it relates to illegal immigrants in this country and whether or not they can access those services.
Let me add to your point, just because Senator Mark Wayne Mullen also raising concerns about the Senate parliamentarian along those lines. Here was their take.
It seems politically motivated, and I have a problem with that. The parliamentarian is not supposed to be in politics, and I'm not accusing her of that. I haven't heard her explanation of it. I want to see it. Before I just take this decision, I want to see how she got to the decision.
When you're blaming the parliamentarian,
Rob says term limits and throw the bums out.
I've also heard blaming the Congressional Budget Office. I mean, Washington is filled with unelected bureaucrats who are making decisions. This is just a decision that Republicans don't like. And this July 4th deadline is something that the president has constructed. It's not real. He just wants it done. The Senate's slow, and this is why the Senate is slow. They work on the details. They they talk a lot, and things get hammered out. And the parliamentarian didn't make up these rules. These are the Senate rules. And she's just requiring that they follow them. And right. And so that's what's going on here. When you're attacking the process, it's because you've kind of run out of other arguments. No offense, Rob.
Yeah, I think what's really important here, Audie, is the piece that we just saw that Jeff did in talking to Serena and her mother. That is the face of the people who need Medicaid. It's not the undocumented immigrants that are getting Medicaid. It's not people who are, abusing it or who are involved in fraud. It is Serena and her family. And so I love that we are putting a face to this, because sometimes our arguments here can become so esoteric. Millions of people like Serena are going to lose that health care if this bill passes. And that's why you have 3/4 of the American people hate this bill. So the politics of this all around, from coast to coast and up and down in this country, including in red states, as we have seen with Senator Hawley, are awful. And Republicans know it.